General Protocol Spaces, banking on freedom.
Welcome to General Bull 55 of In What Does Consensus Even Mean? We're going to cover this. This is actually something we've talked about repeatedly many times over the years, especially in times of crisis, unfortunately, which we'll probably cover a bit. So we've learned a lot from crises and also just from thinking and trying to understand what needs to be done, what's important, what's not important. And I think Uname is going to be covering most of the topics here, but it's something all of us at General Protocols, and I'm sure a lot of people in Bitcoin Cash have thought about over the years. And I want to make one thing clear at the beginning that there's the meaning of consensus for millions of things, for society in general, for all kinds of things. And it's really important, first off, to recognize that Bitcoin Cash, permissionless money, consensus is in that context. And we're not trying to solve every problem in the world. We're not trying to solve everything. We're not trying to solve society or solve the human. We're trying to make sure that permissionless money can work, and it has a lot of other things that are related to it, but we're not trying to solve all the problems. All right, Uname, I know you've got a long list of things to cover. Where do you think we'd start with this? Actually, before we start, Jonathan, do you think that's a fair statement that I said? I don't think we necessarily limit super narrowly to permissionless money. Of course, there's things that are related to it that are important, but I think that's a fair statement, roughly, that we share, right? That we have to stay focused and not try to think of
Well,
solving
we
everything.
have to stay. Particularly, we have to stay focused on the type of consensus that people generally have in mind when they are talking about coins. Although that can be pretty wide, and that also overlaps a lot with other types of
It definitely does.
other kinds of consensus that happens elsewhere that has no relation to coins whatsoever. And yeah,
Right. Jonathan, you think it's a fair claim?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Because there are people who think oh, the one thing is gonna solve all the problems, and it's like, well, let's just solving one problem would be fantastic. Let's solve one problem and then let that spread to others. But all right, Uname, where are we going today?
So I just want to start with the general perception of what people think when they hear the word consensus. In the wider context. In general, when people think about consensus, because this has actually been used and abused in many places. Uh, People generally think of it as just okay. There are a
Jonathan, can
lot
you
of
hear
people.
Uname?
Do you hear me?
I hear you just fine, Uname.
Okay. Um, Whenever we get a lot of actors, we get a lot of people. Wait, John, do you hear me? I think Jonathan hears me. Group.
Yeah, I'm still here and I can still hear you, but it seems that Emergent cannot hear at the moment.
Whatever about it working the second time. It would take more time. Anyway, so I'll just we can keep the conversation going. So consensus in the widest sense is just methods, a very poorly defined method or methods where many actors come to agree on what to do next. So uh, the deepest impression that I first got on it was actually not actually not in the blockchain context. It was back in the days of Occupy Wall Street, and like it was kind of new to me although the method has definitely been used before, where people would say, "Oh, how do you decide? How do you decide things? How do you decide where to go and what to do? W- like, who are your leaders? We don't have leaders. This is a leaderless protest." Okay, so how do you decide on, and how do you decide on anything? Surely you need to decide on something. There are things that you need to decide on, like, you need to clean up, you need to decide on who gets to speak. You can't have everybody speaking all the time all at once. So apparently the method to decide on things was the method to decide on things was quote unquote by consensus. And in the case of Occupy Wall Street, uh, the quote unquote consensus apparently just people would yell, and then eventually, just by magic, um, they would all they will all agree on a thing, or not, as seen in later stages of the movement. So that was my first exposure to like a deep like a use of consensus that caused a deep impression. And then there was the specialized use case in crypto, where we have a couple layers. The most common one being, okay, you have a blockchain. You have a blockchain. Blockchains have tips. How do you decide on which tip to follow? People may and will decide on different tips. Which tip do you follow? And then the wider ones. Okay, you have a mechanism to decide from second to second and minute to minute which tip to follow. Um, how do you? But the way the way you produce these blocks, these tips, would follow certain rules. How do you decide on which rules to follow? And then there is the even wider sense of, okay, which clients do you run? Um, what came to be called social consensus in a very nebulous and non-technical way. So there are definitely many different layers of that, and but I think all of these layers goes back to the primal question of, okay, we got a lot of actors. How do they decide on how do they agree on what to do, or not agree on what to do at once?
Yeah, I mean, we can very clearly see, like in crypto Twitter, the like yell all you can and hope for the best strategy, and how that plans out. So I'm not a fan of that version. Um, yeah. So I also
Well,
have
well,
a
when
demonstration.
oh, I was going to say, when people have that version, they what I have seen when people are yelling a lot and arguing and talking, a lot of times in those cases, from what we have seen, at least in BTC BCH history, is that the people that are yelling have nothing to do with actual consensus, right? The actual consensus is happening somewhere else. In those cases, right? Somebody is calling the shots, and it's not the people making a lot of noise and just spamming stuff on the internet.
Yeah, and
There's some
if
degree
nothing
of
else is going
consensus
on
there.
elsewhere, then the yelling, the loudness of how they yell are often themselves manipulated by something that is not visible. So, you guys hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was about to say earlier that like if no one complains about what you are yelling about, you have like a silent, uh, not consent, but they're not working against you, so it kind of becomes some sort of consensus or census or whatever. But yeah, I'm not really a fan of the megaphone version. I think we would do well to move away from that one in many contexts.
Yep. and that is that particular outcome, that particular way of quote unquote achieving consensus is often just the default of what happens when there are literally no rules. Um, and so
Well, to go back, what I mean, like an example of what I mean in the context of what you said before, with when there's a megaphone consensus, the actual consensus is happening somewhere else. I really believe that, right? Because uh, there's the thing, right? The quis custodiet ipsos custodes, right? Like who watches the watchers, and in like a year or two ago, I don't remember where I came up with the alternate Latin phrase, which is what was it? Questis questionis or something like that. It basically means who asks the questions. And so if you look at those megaphone consensus processes, back at Occupy Wall Street, there's people voting on something, perhaps, with some weird hand signals or whatever, which is,
Yep.
I'm not making fun of that, right? They were trying their best. But who asked the question that's getting voted on is also part of consensus, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's something that everybody didn't vote on, right? There's always some meta, there's always some lower level of somebody making decisions just by being the person holding the megaphone, right? So yeah, whenever you see that going on, there's still some underlayer to it, and perhaps that's always the case. It's always going lower, but but that's what we're here to talk about, right? Is to figure out what is this consensus thing. Is it just answering questions, or is it deciding what questions to ask, or how deep does it go?
Yep. And I think one misconception a lot of people have is that if you have rules in consensus decisions, then that is by default less free. It would mean that people are um it would mean that people have less freedom to participate and whatnot. Well, I mean, that is very often the opposite of what happens, because if you don't have formal rules, then informal rules would emerge, and the informal rules are very often quite a bit more restrictive than the formal rules. Like, for example, what you said, like in a scene dominated by just sheer loudness of voice, well, who gets the megaphone, and you know, which cartels are forming, and how much advantage do they have in getting the megaphone, and making people believe how that their particular megaphones are important, because of the lack of alternative, because it is just a shouting match. Um, those things are important, and they are not necessarily any less restrictive than formal rules. Um, so it is a common misconception that I think needs to be uh, that needs to be cleared, particularly given the history of BCH. And historically, a lot of actors have just deflected any criticism by saying, "Oh yeah, but you can't have any rules. You can't have any rules. You can't. Um, the less rules there are, the better." Um, that which applies both technically and socially, and that 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 has historically also often led to bad outcomes. Um, but yeah, let's get back to the blockchain part instead of the Occupy Wall Street part.
Yes,
Um,
yes, for sure. One at some point, I want to get to the maybe not yet. I don't want to get in the wrong space, but there's a phrase that you've heard if you've been in crypto for any amount of time from someone who will say, code is law, or uh, math is law, something along those lines, right? And I don't want to say it's black and white and say it's absolute nonsense. There is some, there's some root of truth in the phrase, but more or less it's nonsense, right? But are we going to get to that at some point, or later on, or?
Well, I mean, it fits into the general framework. I would say here that I personally believe in a very heavily modified version of that say. Code is not law, but instead, code is a form of, I would say, both law and law enforcement in itself. It is a form,
right.
but it is in the wider sense. There is no like one true law. Not even the ones
Yes,
passed by legislation.
I think that's the one. Yeah, people miss, right? Is that there's no absolute, unchangeable set of rules or truths when it comes to setting rules.
Yeah, and
that's a good way to say it.
Yeah, and the code that people run is both strictly speaking, a form of law enforcement, and also, because of how consensus works, a form of law itself, although not the law. People who just want to people will want just to pare down to like, oh, code is the law, is just trying to misrepresent like what is actually going on. And perhaps,
I think people misunderstand, right? I think they hope, right? I see it in an optimistic view that people who say that kind of thing are hoping, right, that there will be something better than what they've faced so far, which is a quite unjust universe that they're living in. And so I kind of get that there's a hope in that phrase, and I think there is some hope in it, but it's like anything where if you believe in something that's not true, you're really putting yourself at risk, which I think a lot of us felt back in 2014, 15, 16, 17, the lead up to the split of BTC and BCH, that you kind of believed that things would work out, and you believed that the incentives would work, and you hope that they would, but it turns out that people are people, and there was a lot of dirty shit going on in the background, and the code wasn't law. In that sense, in that defensive sense, that it's going to protect you from the bad things.
Yeah, and
yes, a lot of
go ahead.
Yeah, a lot that we have covered this topic previously in discussion of the context of smart contract, when it said things like the scripting language allows us to like not need law enforcement, but instead write the rules that apply and enforce them with blockchain. But I'll say that is actually not so much touching on the consensus side as it's touching something entirely different. From the consensus side, the idea of code is law is misguided at best, because when you're looking at the actual consensus when it comes to it, it turns out that the real consensus for law is not in the people who are living their day-to-day lives, because take, for example, like the blockchain, and someone manages to get tail inflation and some tail emission in or something, and now there are people who are participants in the system, but they do not make up the actual law around it, because law matters for the enforcement side. They do make up the consensus side for it, and they can choose to not participate, but they can't force a change against those who are doing differently. Like, they can't really dictate what is true. They can only choose one side of a split, or choose one ecosystem to be a part of, or whatever.
The ETC ecosystem has some, I'm sure, some deep scars on this subject, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the case of smart contract, I would say that yes, it can. we can apply a even more refined modification of code is law to smart contracts, where instead of code is law, code is um, code is a mega code is a mega bundle of atomic law, where if you don't the cost of not enforcing it on a contract is very costly, because you would also have to deny a bunch of other things. But despite being costly, it is doable, as John said, as seen in the ETH/ETC split. Yeah, that is probably a more precise way to describe it.
Yeah, let me expand on that just in case it's not clear, or for the record. There's people who are entering smart contracts on BCH, or even just you send BCH from one person to another, which technically is a small smart contract, but whatever. But anyway, you've sent money somewhere or made a deal with someone on BCH using a contract, or sent money to an address, whatever it is you've done. And what Uname was saying is that if you're going to break the rules for somebody on the chain to do something on the chain, the cost is huge to do that, because now you can't just break the rules for one person, generally speaking, right? You'd have to break the rules for everybody, or you'd have to cause some kind of massive disruption to the chain. And if the more people are using it, right, that's the whole concept. There has to be millions of people using it before this really becomes a pain to somebody who, or some organization that holds power to kind of cause a change like this. Once you're causing that much pain because you're causing a problem for so many people, that cost becomes so high that it's starts to become an actual meaningfully a concept of, okay, this is actually a kind of de facto law, because if you change it, it changes a lot of different things. It's going to cause a lot of problems. So yeah, just to expand a bit on what that means to say that there's a big cost when you want to futz with the rules. Yeah. But then it gets into the layers of consensus, because what if it's like USDT, where okay, yes, it's totally permissionless, you can do whatever you want as long as you're not on some blacklist somewhere. Wait a minute, what does that mean, right?
Yeah, and so that I would say is the sub basement, the B1 level of why anything means anything. Like why do we have crypto or blockchains at all? What are the advantages? I would say at the sub basement level, it is because we have something valuable. We have something valuable as in the whole system, and a lot of the rules that we formalize, the transactions that we have included in blocks, the smart contracts that we publish, those things are bundled into the whole valuable system. And it is very costly, if not impossible, to selectively bring down one thing or another without bringing down the whole system. And that is what gives people, I would say, confidence on the individual things. This is as opposed to an arbitrary system where, say the courts. You can bribe the judge. You can perhaps manipulate the jury, and you have a particular very favorable outcome, which is perhaps unjust in a particular case. And the society at large just continues working as if nothing happens. And that is a scenario which is very ripe for unjust and just generally untrustworthy outcomes. So I would say that is the sub basement sub-basement assumption. In the non-blockchain space, people, you may notice that there are some mechanisms that, on the surface level, it doesn't make sense, but they are attempts to have tighter bundling of individual cases to the whole system in order to make the individual cases more trustworthy. So, for example, in law, you have the concept of precedence. So if a court makes a decision somewhere, then it would heavily influence all the decisions in the future. That is, on the surface, you're like, oh, is that just a way a way for the courts to, make themselves look nice? Well, I mean, maybe the raw motivation is to just make themselves look nice and for people to not fire the judges. But I would say on a deeper level, that is an attempt. That is a very crude attempt to bundle individual decisions, make them count more in the whole system in an attempt to make them more trustworthy. And in the case of crypto, that is formalized in code and informally played out in game theory, which I would say is a better system and underlies a bunch of other things.
Yes, and I think it's worth mentioning here that while enforcement on the side of the courts fundamentally comes from guns, right? From people with weapons who can put you in jail. The one that works on Bitcoin Cash in the future that we're talking about is the value. So if you break the rules, you're going to be trashing a huge amount of value, probably both for yourself and for many people who are going to be mad at you that you've done that. So that's where the enforcement mechanism comes from, which goes back to the whole design of Bitcoin and why it actually is interesting and meaningful.
Well, I mean, not just that. If you did that, a lot of people are going to be mad at it. It's more like if you don't go through like a lot of people being mad at you and you don't overcome them, which is very costly. You can't do the thing at all. It's not like I do the thing and then people are gonna be mad at me, but I get to do the thing. No, you don't get to do the thing because the thing that you do, like for example, you make a fork that gives all the coins to yourself, is completely meaningless without overcoming and subjugating many people who are gonna be mad at you.
Yes, very fair. Like it's even hard to do it in the first place. So this is worth mentioning because there's a lot of other places where that is pretty much every other case where that is not the case. It doesn't matter well, not exactly not the case, but when you don't have a giant network effect behind a particular piece of software, particular people and so forth, this means nothing. Like code is law has zero meaning without a network effect of, hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of people doing something. Once it has a network effect, then these costs come into play with Bitcoin or with incumbent software projects and whatever. But without that, you really have nothing. None of this means anything.
Yep.
I was going to say, if we took everything we've said so far and you kind of took a snapshot of it, like at this moment, then it would, I think, apply, right? Where we're saying, okay, there's the first level, the consensus rules established by, for in our case, Bitcoin Cash. These are the consensus rules that the network has. This is how it works. This is what you can do, and these are some things you can't do, and so forth. It's all code, and to some degree, it's code is law, right? With all these huge caveats that we put on there. But then there's as time moves on, right? As time moves on, there's a deeper discussion to be had. It's really not about the code, right? It starts to be people. And so where does that go? Like in a snapshot, sure. To some degree, code is some kind of law if you have a network effect.
I would say it's not even strictly true in any given snapshot. I would say that this is where the concept of expectations in the consensus comes in, and code is published code in particular is a form of expectation. It is a particularly strong form of expectation, but it is a form of expectation. Um, so it goes back to the Byzantine generals problem, which some of the listeners are probably way too familiar with already, where you don't have if you don't have an overall like higher up command, direct command, how do people coordinate, right? And the way people coordinate is, I would say, by establishing expectations. And a good system would result in that people have some expectation, and out of that expectation they self-fulfill that expectation for other people. So as long as a lot of people have the same kind of expectations, they would tend to do things that reinforce that expectation. And if this happens, that would be a good consensus system.
I'll also add here that without incentives, that model breaks down entirely.
Yes.
So that kind of consensus only works in a system where everyone is better off from cooperating, because if you don't have that, it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and the reason to have incentives is to make the cooperation meaningful. Like, okay, I act according to expectations, and which reinforces the overall expectation, and I get some reward. I will get some reward, and that reward is super nice. And if you don't have that reward, then I might decide. Then there's no good reason for me to act according to expectation, and there might be other hidden incentives to act badly, and then the system falls apart. But going back to the
the
code,
reward,
yeah.
you can also have a punishment.
The
It can go the other way, and I think in blockchains, the other way is actually the more relevant part.
yeah,
Right? If we are looking at a consensus issue and people are not in agreement, then acting in disagreement hurts everyone's finances. Like, everyone is worse off. So the punishment takes place, and you stay away from doing the things that are actually dangerous to you.
Yes. Although I would say that in crypto, generally speaking, the punishment works by taking away the incentive that was given out in the first place. Because it's very hard to do the IRL thing where you can have a strict punishment by going to someone's house and dragging them out and putting them in a jail or caning them or whatever, right? Blockchains in general can't do that. So you first have to give something out, and then you take it away as punishment. But yeah, back to the code thing. So I would say that code that people run is a particularly strong form of establishing expectations. And it is made stronger by the fact that the code is published open and people can see what it is supposed to do. Because ultimately, if you really think about it, okay, there is code, and I think everybody else is running like this piece of code, this particular version of Node. So according to Satoshi's designed incentives, I should probably also run this piece of code to maximize my returns, my chances of return. But if you really think about it, unless you literally hack into other people's computers, you are not actually seeing what they run as far as a particular piece of code. You have several ways of inferring that. You can observe the blockchain and how it extends, and have some general idea of where that is going. A new block is being added. People are putting proof of work into this block, and this block works through a particular rule set. And because people put proof of work into it, it is likely that there are a lot of people running this piece of code that at least pertains to this rule set that was published that was accepted in this block. And I go to an exchange. The exchange accepts this block. That means that the exchange is likely running the same rules and running the same code. And then, well, what exactly are the code? What are the things that this block or that block hasn't told me yet? Well, I go to GitLab, GitHub, and I can see I can see some lines of code that is very likely what is going on in other people's computers too. So combine these things, I have an expectation, and that informs me on how I should run my own thing, which is in most cases running the exact same piece of code as other people. So that is a more detailed breakdown of how the expectation works, I would say. And it is not just a thought exercise, because there are several points in this process where it can be swayed one way or another. And we've seen it play out in 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 certain scenarios already.
Are you going to cliffhanger us? Or are you going to tell us this?
Should I go on? Well, why? I was just taking a 5-second break in case you guys have anything to add.
I want to hear the story. Let's go.
Okay. So I said that there are a fundamental truth is that you never actually get to know what other people are running in their computers. You can only infer them. You can only infer them from what's available to you in terms of information. The blockchain itself is a strong source of information, but it happens in the past. It has some, which does give you some confidence in about the future, but it is not set in stone. The published code is also a source of information that is really strong. This is at least I believe why crypto node, a decentralized crypto, must always have open source codes. Because if it is closed source, then you never actually know what the rules are, and it becomes and so a lot of the assumptions about a lot of the game theory assumptions about consensus breaks down. So you can read the code that is published, and it gives you another set, and then you combine this. It informs you about the future. The information is imperfect, but in general, it should work well. So in some cases, this can be manipulated. Like, for example, particularly in the case of soft forks. This is a way of manipulation that has been brought up several times, particularly in BTC land. We do it a lot less not at all, I would say, in BCH land. And in a couple of times, they would claim that it has succeeded. In other times, it has failed. But I would say that they don't spell it out, but it is a way of manipulation. So it works like this. By watching the blocks, you can infer what is the current rule set, and there are certain things that are inferred more strongly than the others. But you can't tell if people are willing to enforce a stricter rule set in the next block. So, and that fact can, at least in theory, be gamed. So it is the basis of back in the block size war days. It is the basis of the UASF movement. where because SegWit is technically a soft fork, is technically a soft fork where people enforce a stricter rule set that the mere threat just by the threat of enforcing it unilaterally and yelling really loudly, there is a possibility that people can be scared enough to follow them. And in BCH land, we know that ultimately that is not the case. These guys are clowns. But there is a real basis in that mechanism that if you can manipulate the non-block space loudly enough, there is a chance that that can succeed. And that is likely also the basis of the current ongoing BIP 110 effort, although that one is even more clown. So I don't think that's going anywhere. But it is there. And I don't want to just talk about the I don't want to just talk about the bad side of this. I also want to talk about the good side of this, I would say, extra manipulation outside of blockchains.
Wait. But before we get to that, I mean, like a Rubicon has been crossed thematically here, right? Because we're going from code is law, which we established very clearly is something that you certainly can't take at face value. It's a very weak statement, but it's an interesting.
You can't take for granted. Yeah.
Yes, it's a kind of law. It's an establishment of rules and expectations. Sure, it certainly is one mechanism of doing that. But now we've gone to the place that we learned exists many years ago, but I think a lot of people in crypto still don't either understand it exists or they want it not to exist, right? I think that's probably the most common strain. People want this next case not to exist. And that's that whatever the code is, whatever the consensus is, it does not solve the human. It does not remove humans from the picture. There is no ultimate piece of code that runs and it's like, oh, well, this now runs humanity, right? Or some aspect of humanity. There's always in some form people behind something, and there's always some room for things to change. And whether that's good or bad really doesn't matter. You have to just accept that it is the truth. And now but yeah, that's where you're getting into, yes, we saw some very, very dirty aspects of this situation. And then I guess you're about to talk about some good ones. And then there's also, I hope we'll also get into why it's important to be aware of it. And so that you can make sure that it's out in the open and managed and discussed and taken seriously as opposed to happening behind closed doors. So sorry, but yeah, I wanted to make sure that we get across that this is a huge change from this code focus to people.
Yes, and I would say the next example I have, I think is a very good and important and very useful thing. Not just useful, but it is particularly important in the BCH context. But it is so poorly understood in the past that even some very good and very well-intentioned people are totally hate it. And I would say that it is very important. It is very important that as many people, in fact, if even one more person understand this issue better, I would say today's Spaces has made this point. But I think it is very important for as many BCH people to understand this as this mechanism as possible, both for perpetuating it usefully, and also for when the time comes in the future where we may change this mechanism, either eliminating it or substituting it for something else, that we may do so responsibly and for the better. And the mechanism that I'm talking about is the expiry mechanism on BCHN, which was inherited from Bitcoin ABC before it. And for the unfamiliar, BCHN by default
inherited and improved, not just inherited. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 true. Um, for people who are unfamiliar with it, so on all default builds of BCHN, which is the most widely used mining and exchange nodes on the BCH network. There is a mechanism uh, that runs on a yearly schedule. So every year, starting from April 15th, noon UTC, the node would start warning you about an upcoming upgrade, and that you should seek the next version as soon as possible and substitute it in. The warning goes on command lines whenever you do anything, and it goes on for an entire month. Most people don't read that. And then what happens on 1 month later, on May 15th, which people may also notice is now the time of happening where the Bliss conference happens, partly to celebrate it this day, and is also has also been the time of upgrade for several years already. On May 15th, the node on its default builds would just stop stop working for all intents and purposes. Like, you can still quote unquote use it, but it would not accept blocks. It would stop talking, and so it ceased to be useful very quickly. And people are like, "Oh, wait a second. So this is a feature that strictly makes the node less useful, right?" And some people would even make the connection, make the I would say, and not make the comparison to, "Oh, it's planned obsolescence. It's a forced upgrade. It's bullshit." Um, And I would say that those criticisms are unjust, because they completely lack the context of why this mechanism is in place. And personally speaking, I think it is very important, and I actually kind of really hoped that other nodes would follow in taking up this mechanism, but none of them are probably in a good enough shape to push this kind of updates. So it has just been left alone for other nodes, and BCHN has so far been the only one doing this, unfortunately. So the way the mechanism works is like this. So it is actually a setting that is very easily bypassed. You can insert a single line in your configuration file, and voila, your node doesn't expire anymore, and it would attempt to continue working as usual past the expiration date. Um, but
And that's how it used to work with ABC.
yes, that is yeah. And but the existence or the ease of bypass uh doesn't actually matter, because this is a way of pushing expectations. And because this mechanism is there, and every year the mechanism is there, you can read it in the code, you can compare hashes to see that the default builds all contain this piece of code. And every year, I would say, it is further reinforced by people swarming in on May 15 on the official channel, asking, "Oh, my node has stopped working. Has stopped working, what do I do?" Okay, that is how you know, many people out there are not conspiring on some alternative version. Apparently they all run this version, and they have this mechanism. by establishing this expectation, it gives us a window of opportunity that for people to decide on upgrades. Without this mechanism, upgrades are particularly costly to push. In some other chains, as we have seen, you have miner signaling, and then people would argue over what kind of meaning does what does this signaling mean, and do they actually run the code? And we have seen scenarios in the past where the signal doesn't actually mean anything, as in the block size wars, where the majority of miners would signal one thing, and then they just tell people, oh yeah, we are just signaling our support, we are not actually running that code. It gets really messy. It gets really messy because expectations are hard to change. You have to establish something strong that, okay, things are changing. You're going somewhere. You're going somewhere instead of going nowhere. Um, and that is what enabled us to move from one consensus rule set to the other smoothly without a lot of drama every year. I would say it all comes down to
not just low drama, but also just reduced pain, right? For people who
yes.
Are well intentioned and are just wanting to keep using BCH, and they have a node for their exchange or pool or whatever, and they just didn't get the message, because actually we spend a lot of effort to contact all kinds of people to make sure that people upgrade and promote it and so forth, but still people don't. And if they keep working, like for example, the worst case is mining. This is why the old ABC setup was bad, was they keep mining, and they're mining on the different chain than anybody else, and not because they want to, but because it's an accident. They're literally mining blocks, wasting money, mining a chain that's nobody's going to use. So yeah, it's better for everybody to just force them to be aware.
The old ABC setup was particularly I would say is unnecessarily cruel.
It was bad.
Where if you don't upgrade, the node actually doesn't tell you anything. It would just change your magic number and make you mine a new and completely incompatible blockchain for no reason.
Yes,
which is unnecessarily cruel, and I would say does not contribute to this process of establishing an expectation of change every year.
Exactly, and also your exchange would accept your exchange might accept potentially fraudulent, transactions of somebody trying to trick them or whatever. No, stopping it is a better. Now, I think it's worth mentioning here, right? Because we're getting into the people aspect. All of this is the people aspect, right? The intention, expectations, like you were saying, by how can I say it? And anyway, it's worth reinforcing that we're getting into the aspect of people making decisions here, and not just, oh well, the code decides everything and I don't need to think at all, which is not the case. But there's another it's not black and white, right? So I was going to say there's a large contingent of people who hold on to this concept of, you can never change anything that causes things to be backwards incompatible, right? Like the Linux kernel is famous. You don't fuck with user space, the famous phrase, the famous line from Linus Torvalds. But I think BCH strikes a very good balance here, where yes, to the absolute greatest extent possible, BCH as an ecosystem tries not to break things for people. But when it comes to upgrades, they're so valuable and they're so worth it that it breaks for a very small group of people, which is pools, operators, exchanges, and people like that, right? Like they have to be aware, and they have to pay attention, and they have to upgrade. And I personally think that's a good trade-off there, because for people who don't know the trade-off between a hard fork and a soft fork, soft forks are messy, and they're gross, and they create all kinds of gross kludges and problems going forward in software. So as long as we can do hard forks, I think it's a pretty good mechanism, the one that you were describing, for making sure that people make a decision and participate one way or the other.
Yeah, and the other nice thing about this mechanism is that it preserves some of the ideological purity. I would say it preserves most of it, but people might have different opinions. In that, the expectation that is established here is merely that, okay, on this date there will be change. This mechanism does not tell you what that change should be, or where to find that change, or who should tell you about that change. The mechanism is about that, okay, something needs to be done at this date. That's it. The end.
And for anybody who's worried about why would you force changes, it doesn't mean a change of behavior. You could have an empty change, but even if you don't change anything, you still have to choose to move to the new rule set. Not the new rule set. You have to choose to continue with the old rule set, as opposed to accidentally continuing with the old rule set.
Yep. You can even elect to remove this mechanism altogether, as long as enough people are on your side. Yeah. But basically, you brought up an interesting point in the case of soft forks and hard forks. Like, we have this mechanism of establishing expiration expectations, so that we would have a smoother, and I would say a smoother process that is still decentralized enough and non-judgmental enough for people to have hard forks. Well, what about soft forks? Why can't I've seen places like BTC where they just push soft forks. Soft forks apparently don't need this, right? What's the deal with that? Why don't people just do that? What? Well, the thing about soft forks is that it is indeed generally easier to push than hard forks. But the reason they are easier to push is pretty bad. The reason soft forks are easier to push is because, technically speaking, you don't have to establish the expectations that everybody is changing. You merely have to establish the expectation that all the miners are changing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And given how, unfortunately, how centralized the modern mining scene is, it is a lot easier to do that. It is a lot easier to do that than establishing that everybody's changing.
I'm guessing that a lot of people who are in love with softworks, I have to guess that a lot of them don't even know that the miners must change. There's not a choice to just be like, I don't need to change. It's a soft work, right? You don't change, and you're gonna end up going somewhere else and mining empty chain.
And on one hand, they must change. On the other hand, it is made easier by the fact that there are fewer of them. And I would say that in a lot of cases, you go through the whole song and dance on Twitter, but in fact, in the final round, what you do is that you go around and you make some really intense phone calls, or even get all of them in a room, hopefully not on a private island somewhere, and then they all agree, right? The making of the sausage is not very pretty, and I would say is way uglier than having an open expectation of, okay, yeah, this is likely what people would run, and it's going to expire on this date, so people will change to something, and hopefully that is the same thing that you are thinking of changing to. Yeah.
Let me ask you to go to a slightly different place here, a higher level place. So before we were talking about code, and now we're talking about people, but we kind of jumped into like right into the middle of the forest. What if you step back and there's some people listening to this at some point in the future, and they think, yeah, but people shouldn't be involved in this. They shouldn't be a human process because that's fundamentally flawed, or whatever their reasoning is, right? Like, could you explain? Well, at least from my perspective, I think we agree on this, that you cannot do that in the first place. You cannot remove the people from this thing, and then why it's also a bad idea. Like, even if you could, that would be a bad idea. Could you kind of speak at a high level about that?
Well, I mean, we're in 2026, so presumably one way to remove humans from this process is to kill everybody and then replace them with LLMs. Then there will be no humans involved. But that that is probably not what everybody's thinking, right? But yeah, minus.
Well, no, that's not even a solution, right? Because now the LLMs have to fight it out. It's just it's moving the problem to a technical solution, but not a
it's not a great solution, but it is a technically correct solution.
There's no humans involved. That's true.
Anyway, so. I would say it goes even deeper. Like just now we talk about the B1 level of what's the of where does the value of rule sets come from, and we can go even deeper, right? Like you could say that on a very, very basic sense, even the establishment of Ethereum is an attempt to change consensus, because at the B2 level, people have to choose to use your coin, and that is a form of consensus. Like, where do people put their value in, and where do people put their transactions and business on? And that is a even deeper level of choosing and expectations, and it is not trivial. Because on another level, like Ethereum is an attempt to change the coin distribution and the rule set of Bitcoin. BCH, I would say that after the fork, similar, and BTC, you might very well say that it is an like crypto as a whole is an attempt to change the rule set of the currency systems that humanity use. So yeah, you cannot remove humans from this, at least not at least as long as we dismiss the very trivial solution of killing all the humans, because humans have to choose what is valuable. So that is the most powerful thing at the very basic level.
Well said. And I think a lot of people who have some ideological motivation will definitely be able to identify that with that, right? Like we are trying to change the rules of money, or some set of things that are related to money, and that's absolutely part of the intent. And if you think of it that way, then yeah, it becomes obvious that humans are making that choice. If they weren't, then we're not really. There's nothing. Yep. We're not doing anything that's worth anything.
Yep. But on the other hand, I want to caution against this because once we establish that okay, you cannot remove humans from the expectations and the decisions because humans choose where they put their value in, and that underlies everything. I want to caution about that because if you take this argument to the extreme, then it becomes easy to make the opposite, like anything goes kind of argument. And this is an argument that I have seen pop up repeatedly during the 2020 BCH Civil War, where the argument is that, oh yeah, if it doesn't matter if it's centralized, it doesn't matter if all the coins are like we take a big chunk of coin that just arbitrarily give it to somebody. It doesn't matter if the decisions are formally established with some weird shit, with some weird shit council or whatever. Because ultimately the world is decentralized and people choose where to put their value in. So, if this is not valuable, people would not put their thing in, and that is why everything is decentralized. It becomes very tempting to make that argument for arbitrary purposes, and I want to caution about that. And they're like, okay, so do you want to caution about that because it sounds bad and it goes against it makes you uncomfortable, it makes you icky? No, it's more solid than that, right? It's not just the ickiness and the fact that it makes me very uncomfortable. I would say that it goes back to the B1 basement argument that we said a little bit ago, and it degrades the value of that argument. So if you may recall, the B1 basement argument is that you have whenever you have a set of rules, the reason those rules in crypto is valuable is because you can have an expectation that it is very difficult to change these rules. They are enforced atomically. It is very difficult to change these rules and arbitrarily fuck you over without bringing down the entire system and the expectations and all the value that goes with it. That is the expectation. Now, if you make a change, say to just arbitrarily concentrate power, okay, instead of an open set of expectations out there that is enforced decentralized in a decentralized way, instead you go into a system where you have a guy with a website, and then the guy on the website tells you which block to pick. We have seen it in certain BCH forks, and they make very spirited efforts in defending it. So the guy tells you that guy with the website tells you which block to pick instead of some open and unbiased rule set. Also, the guy also gets a bunch of money given to him because he says so. If you have such a system, then that guy can also arbitrarily just fuck you over. He can't. You can't. You can't depend on the basement assumption anymore, where it is very difficult for me to get fucked over, because in order to fuck me over, the whole system has to be toppled, and that is costly. No, you now have a guy. If the guy doesn't like you, the guy can come over and set out some arbitrary rule that you are gonna be fucked over. And because the system already established that what the guy says is the rules, the system will continue working on the assumption that what that guy says is the rule. And so that brings down the value. That throws So that throws the value that fundamentally I would say throws the basement assumption and the value with it out of the window.
I'd say that this is important to say that, I don't know, out the window. It's all on a spectrum, right? On one end of the spectrum, you're not really able to set any expectations, because any expectations you set, or you finally are like, okay, good, I can understand how this money system works, and on one end of the spectrum, yeah, some dude has a very high chance of changing those rules to whatever it ends they want. That's a very bad situation, right? It's not. Maybe you trust that guy. Maybe it's Linus Torvalds, or maybe it's Guido, like from Python or something like that. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's a very dangerous place. It's not black and white. But then we're not trying to be there. Like, we're already there, where feds and central banks and so forth basically control how money works, even if it's a horrible decision. We're trying to get further away from that, like towards the other end of the spectrum, where it's like, okay, yes, people are involved, people can change things, but you have a very high expectation of stability, and things are not going to be, drastically changed or unfairly changed and so forth. So it's not black white, but we are trying to get to the other end of that spectrum.
Yeah, it's true. It's not black and white, and the value, the new assumption, the value of the new assumption is not zero, because what essentially happens is that you change from one set of assumption where my rules are enforced atomically and fair and openly, and you can't bring me down without bringing down the whole system, blah 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 blah, to the assumption that, okay, my thing is valuable because the guy likes me and he has no reason to fuck me over. So there is some value in that, depending on how much you like that guy, and how much other people like that guy. But I would argue that ultimately it is still not very meaningful, because in most cases, when you're asked to like that guy and derive value from it, you have to ask yourself, okay, that guy is a crypto bro programmer. Okay, he has some beliefs. I guess I like some of his beliefs, but is he any better than, I don't know, Jerome Powell, or his or the Federal Reserve Council? Maybe yes, maybe no, but a lot of people are probably going to say that the Federal Reserve is more trustworthy. So, and that system already exists and has a lot of network effect. So I would say that ultimately it is, if you go that way, it is a path that doesn't go anywhere, like, in the end.
Yes, for sure. So do you think you've covered it? Do you think somebody listening will be like, okay, at a high level, I understand why it's important for, one, impossible to just remove humans from decision making, and I think that comes back to who asks the questions, right? Like, if you're going to say either it can never change, if you say it can never change, it's going to break, and there will be problems, and it will just fail to be relevant eventually because it just doesn't work. If you don't change anything, right? But then there's okay, well, you make the changes super objective and something. There's some kind of on-chain governance mechanism. It's super hardcore. Into that, it also comes back to that other question of who asks the questions. Okay, well, now you have a governance mechanism where you can make decisions. Who decides what questions get asked in the first place? Who decides how those will get implemented and so forth? It's a bottomless pit of trying to remove human from the thing. And if at some point humans are involved in the process, I think is an important point to accept. Do you think that's fair? That's fair.
Yeah, that is absolutely fair. And I would say that, people, I'm not against, like, argument, formal governance processes per se. And in the future, maybe not in the near future, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but maybe in the distant future, BCH might very well adopt one of those governance processes, or even some that hasn't been designed yet. But it is important to know what they are what they're ultimately for, and why they're valuable, instead of instead of saying something that is not true, as you said, like people say, oh, the reason you have a governance process is to remove humans from the process. That is just not going. That is not going to happen, unless you kill all the humans. But again, that is a trivial solution we are not going to go into.
So tell us what is this? I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but explain it. What is the purpose of a governance mechanism, a meaningful one that would actually be a meaningful one? The chip process, any kind of government process. What is that? Why? What is the human involvement? What is the balance, the value, and the costs and the risks?
Right. So there are several aspects to this, but I would say that fundamentally we have to first acknowledge two things that are in conflict, right? So for any given system design, there are two mechanisms. There are two things that work. First, there is always value in inertia. Like if you can't establish that, okay, the system is going to run this. The system runs like this for now. The system is going to continue to run like this for the next 3 months. The system is going to continue running like this more or less in the next year, and perhaps in 5 years, and perhaps in 10 years. Perhaps in 10 years, like a lot of things might change, but not all the things. There are many things that will continue, and all the things that I think is important would not change. There is a lot of value in establishing this inertia. And there are multiple ways of making that inertia happen. One of them is to not have any way to change things, which is adopted in some places. Like you just make change really difficult, and that is a way to establish inertia. On the other hand, there is value in changing the rule set. Because as time goes on, new technologies would get discovered, and there will be new physical realities in the world, and there will be new needs. There will be new needs that are unfulfilled. Like, for example, you could have a lot of users, and they require a lot of transaction volume that doesn't work as well under your old rule set. So there are many reasons. But in general, there is value in change. So these two are fundamentally against each other, and it is therefore important to know what you want in terms of, okay, which things should go into inertia and which things should be changed, and how should we decide these things. And a lot of people don't acknowledge the value of change. And I think it is also one of the underlying currents back in the block size wars, and it continues. It continues on for many years after that. Some people would even I would say just maliciously manipulate the conflict of these two and take them to absurd places, like BSB, where they would on one hand tell you that it is very important that literally nothing changes, and then they change literally everything. Because
it's another one of those not black and white places, right? There's value in change, and it's also absolutely true that there's value in I really shouldn't use these words, but like liberalism and conservatism. There's value in not changing things in a lot of ways, right? It's something that requires thought and consideration, right?
I used inertia. You might want to use something else. I don't know.
It's a safer word. Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
but yes, because there are very bad reasons to change things, right? Like, oh my God, we have this cool technology that we should definitely use. We should. Mm-hmm. I mean, not to attack anyone, but there was like we should replace the virtual machine with WebAssembly or something like that, and it's like, well, okay, that's an idea.
And why
could
why
do
why should
that.
why should we do that? Because it's modern. It's modern. Holy shit.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, there are very good reasons and tendencies to avoid, right? Like changing things, engineers changing things just because it's cool or because they think it should be changed or whatnot, not considering the big picture. And then on the flip side, as you were saying very well, actually there's big picture reasons that yes, we should be changing things. So yeah, it's again not black and white, but you have to approach it with open eyes and not totally deny one concept or the other.
Yeah. So I mean, the first step in the first step in this exercise is that you have to acknowledge that there is sometimes, and in fact quite often, good cases for having a change. Like if there are some people who don't acknowledge this at all, and I would say that I respect them. But if you don't acknowledge the need for change ever, then there is no more conversation to be had, right? And in fact, given the history of BCH, that's probably not where this guy should be. So that's the fundamental part. And then the second part is that, okay, if change is sometimes valuable, there should be a way to ensure that that the valuable change can be brought about with very little cost. So cost comes in all forms. Some of the cost is paid in literal mining electricity. Some of the cost is paid in the amount of time you debate and go online and shout it out, and delay, and the cost, and in turn cost in delaying the change and whatnot. Some of that cost is paid in reduced confidence. So there are some particular mechanisms that are really bad at all of this, and we should acknowledge that they are bad. So one of the way to do this is one of the way to bring about change is to have mining wars. Uh, and BCH has seen a version of that in the past. So the idea is that the purest way to bring about change is to simply make my chain the longest chain, despite the fact that it was explicitly said that the longest chain is not always the correct chain. The longest chain needs to fit the local rule set. So that is explicitly so that mechanism is basically explicitly branded as not a way to decide which rule set to follow, but some people in the past apparently liked it anyway, and so yay, do mining wars, and the outcome of that is that it does. The outcome of that is a lot of chaos and a lot of confidence lost.
The Klingon consensus. We'll call it the Klingon consensus.
Yeah, fight to the death. Fight to the death. Burn a lot of money and energy and confidence. And yeah. So yeah, I think the second step is to acknowledge that there are more costly and less costly ways to decide on changes, and and it is valuable to go for the less costly ways of changing things,
and ways that identify the high value, because there's other things that are, oh, that's easy to change, that's low cost to change, yeah, but it's worthless, or it has negative value, right? So both, like, correctly identifying valuable changes and making sure that the changes are done in a low cost way, where low cost involves all the things, like you said, not just literal money paid to developers or something like that.
The cost is a relative thing, right? Like if your thing is literally meaningless, then you shouldn't spend any cost on it at all. so you should only consider like you should also consider like how valuable the thing is. Although we do currently have a mechanism on BCH that has worked so far, in that we have the exploration mechanism and we have the chip process and we have an established schedule that I would say minimizes a lot of the overhead uh, that comes with changing the rule set. So the cost has been brought down a lot in absolute terms. Like in general, people don't fight it out to the death in terms of burning mining power anymore, and that is a good thing. It is important to acknowledge that. Um, Yeah. And I would say that the third thing, which is slightly higher level, is that we should also identify, and so this may become subjective, but we should also identify and decide on, okay, which of the cost which of the cost and values do we actually care about. And it's like I think I've seen it again recently in discussions about game theory. Like the number zero step in doing a game theory exercise is to know what you want. Like if you don't know what you want, then you're screwed. You can't have any further discussions. So 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 in the case of BCH, I know I want a bunch of things, right? Like I want a fixed monetary policy that is non-negotiable, and some other people might not want that, but and it is, and they have their reasons to not want that, but I think in general almost all people in BCH want that, so that is a good thing. And there are other things that I know I want, like there should never be a formal authority, because that goes to dangerous places, and as I said before, that it breaks a number of other very valuable assumptions. And there should also be an assumption that will not establish any rules for authorities or censorship. And that is also important. That is also an important thing that I want. So I think uh, generally, if people don't know what they want, it is very easy to fall into a trap of yelling random things that sound good, like, oh, Satoshi, I want Satoshi, I want decentralized. What does decentralized even mean in your context in this particular rule set? I want number go up, or what makes the number go up? You can't just change consensus to make number go up. Like what actually?
I want it to be money, not contracts, or that's another one.
Yeah, like what do you actually want? It is very important to know that. And so the more people dig deeper into what they actually want, the easier and lower cost the decision process is going to be, whatever the process is, including the chip process. Part of the reason why everybody is supposed to publish all the things in chip process is to facilitate that fact finding, right? Like what do people actually want, how much do they agree, and how can we make that very obvious for everybody to lower the cost of change. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, you've said all that very well. People are going to be involved, and it's a matter of deciding how and trying to achieve some goals. And then, of course, just the fact that we're talking about this is like another lower level of the consensus, which is like, well, what does we mean? What does we want mean? What does BCH should mean? All of these things are, it's a fractal of consensus. We probably should wrap up soon. What do you think? Are there some other key points we should put out there on the topic of what is consensus in the BCH context, in the permissionless money context?
I right. So I would say that I would like to go back and re-emphasize the importance of expectations, and the establishing expectations goes with consensus, like in all forms, at every level, all the time. And I don't think it is appreciated enough. Like people talk about incentives. Like incentives is a very important part of establishing expectations, but incentives is only part of that. And there are many hidden ways where this is where expectations can be reinforced or weakened or degraded, and I don't think people appreciate that enough. And I would just generally like people to think more about it, in this particular way, both for establishing rule sets, or even in the more microscopic way in deciding which tip to come. Like you decide when you decide consensus systems. Like Satoshi has a way to use incentives to establish expectations on which tip should win. I would say that is not perfect, but it works, and it has worked well for a very long time. Where else can we do that? And also in terms of just generating social consensus on like establishing rule sets on a very high level. Like, what are the expectations? Where does that expectation come from? Like, why does Uname has any say in why does Uname has any say in in the outcome? Which I hear some people say yes. Why does the Emergent Reasons has any say on the? Why does BCH Artist or Callan has any say on in this? People should generally think more about them, and understand which part is valuable and which part they want to make valuable. And I know this is kind of a very conceptual and vague thing, but yeah, it's what I would like people to think in terms of wrapping up.
All right, and I'll wrap up just to say, yeah, try not to be too black and white in your thinking about these things. What is consensus is a very human process at the end of the day, and what does BCH want for consensus? This generic whatever BCH is, what does it want for consensus is a question that is answered by people at the end of the day. And so, yeah, if there's something that's important to you, then you have to make it an important thing. And it's not just going to happen magically. There's no code that's going to magically make all the right decisions for you. So if it's important to you, it's just like anything else. You're going to have to get involved and make things happen. And you can probably tell from listening to this conversation that we've had, a lot of the things that we think are important. One that specifically wasn't mentioned is just retaining the, as nearly as possible, permissionless nature of participation in the BCH network is fundamentally critical.
And then we can go on for and then we can go on for another 3 hours on what participation.
Yes, but that aspect of it is fundamentally critical, and there's other parts that are critical too. So whatever it is that's important is what people decide is important, and that's what will get focused on and fixed and maintained and worked on and balanced and defended against malicious changes or accidental poor decisions and so forth. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's a human process, but that doesn't mean that it's just anything goes. So yeah, keep your eyes open, be aware, be skeptical. All right. Okay. And also, Jeremy at the BCH podcast is currently doing a podcast. It's live right now. So maybe you want to go and listen in on, see what kind of crazy stuff he's up to over there. But for everybody who's here, thank you. And if you're listening later, we really appreciate this. And please tell us what you think anytime, and tell us which parts of the stuff that we're doing is helpful or valuable to you. Okay. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. Take care. Have a good week.
Thank you.